Surplus, creativity and generosity in a connected age. Welcome back to the show, Clay Shirky.
Thanks for having me.
I guess you would be called an internet guru. Are you comfortable with that?
I don't like the term, but you know, whatever.
So what is happening with the web? It's getting onto mobile devices.
Yep.
Mobile devices are getting more portable. Is that the big thing happening, and what does it do to the web?
That is certainly a big change, and Chris Anderson, who cut his teeth at The Economist, adopted The Economist style to the headline, "The web is dead." The Economist house style is simplify, then exaggerate. So in fact, the web is not dead, but what is happening is that all kinds of other ways of marshaling the resources of the internet, of the underlying platform, are coming to the fore. So anybody who's used an application from an app store on an iPhone or an Android has seen an alternate way to get hold of data. You've got things like...
But that means what you're saying is the old-fashioned way, which is Google search.
Right. Sit down at Google, open a web browser, or sit down in a web browser, open Google, search for something.
That may not be, on a small portable device, you're not going to do that.
Right. It's a lot of extra steps. And in fact, one of the things that you get when you open an application is the application knows, I know what you're already looking for, right? If it's an application about restaurants, it's already got some knowledge of the domain you're interested in. If it's an application about being a tourist, it's already got some knowledge of the domain. So this move away from this completely general purpose browser, the most general purpose platform literally in the history of the software industry, down now to these very specific apps that are custom designed for purpose, a lot of that is being driven by the fact that these little devices in our pocket, they don't have the memory, they don't have the bandwidth, and frankly, we don't have the patience and the little thumbs necessary to do all of the typing. So we're swinging away from the completely general purpose web into this world of a much more tightly designed experience.
And what does that do to the experience? You know, what does it do in a broader, more sociological sense? Because it sounds to me like one of the things that the internet did was it got rid of these sort of broad general platforms like newspapers, frankly, and you instead do information retrieval, where users say, I want this story, I want this subject. Well, this is an even more advanced version of that, because even the general search becomes too general. And you say, no, I actually just want the New York Magazine restaurant application, because I want to figure out what restaurants I want to go to.
Well, this is exactly it, which is every time we get better at predicting what people are going to want, there's some risk to serendipity, right? To the idea that I was looking through a magazine and I came across a story that, you know, I would never have thought I would have cared about the price of corn in Iowa, but now I read this article and it makes it, you know, it makes it interesting, puts it in this long context. Those are the kinds of things that it's easy to come across in print. It's harder to come across on the web, hardest of all to come across on the phone. And in many ways, the challenge, particularly for people who care about an informed public for disseminating news, the challenge is to design back in the serendipity we used to get for free.
But all these things that you're talking about, the web becoming more narrow, people being less exposed to opposite points of view, comes on top of the fact that people are frankly reading less as a result of the web, and as a result of the ability to retrieve information in very narrow packets. So isn't it making us dumber?
Dumber is such a sort of one value question. It is certainly making us wider and shallower, which is to say people are aware of a wider range of things, but as you say, are digging in less. Nick Carr has famously covered this in his book, The Shallows. And Carr's basic thesis seems to me to be correct, right? That there is no such general intellectual capability as multitasking. We're just not good at doing two things at once, by and large. But when you look back at the great revolutions, when you look back at the great media revolutions, what you see is that at a certain point, society, in integrating a new technology, also creates structures around it that hold it into place. So there was, at some point, depending on the country, sometime between the 18th and 19th century, this idea that children should, in general, be literate. We should teach 5-, 6-, 7-year-olds to read. And that is an extraordinary expense and effort that society takes on for itself. But it's necessary to integrate the value of the printing press into the culture. So the question I've got around these tools is, how are we going to manage all of this distracting freedom? Right? Because the upside of these same tools is that it is an extraordinary increase in freedom of the press and freedom of assembly. Right? We've got 3 communicative freedoms in the First Amendment, and the internet creates a world in which all 3 of them now are broadly available, not just freedom of speech. But that freedom comes at a cost, and that cost is, as you noted, distraction. So we need a set of institutions that says, if you have to take on the cost of managing distraction, what do you do? In the same way that 150 years ago, we said, if you have to take on the task of producing literacy, what do you do?
And there is this enormous upside that I often feel people don't talk about enough. I mean, I find that doing research for writing with the internet is just a godsend. There was a time I was writing a column on Iraq, and I remembered from a biography that I had read of Gertrude Bell, the British Foreign Service officer who was in Iraq, that she had written these very evocative letters to her father describing the situation in Iraq, the Sunni-Shia divide. And so I thought to myself, gosh, wouldn't it be great if I could find one of those letters? And 5 minutes later, I'm at the University of Newcastle's website, which happens to have every letter that she has ever written.
All digitized.
All digitized and searchable. Now, I remember when I was in graduate school, this would have been a 4-month exercise with interlibrary loans and microfiches. But you can literally do it in 5 minutes. And that is probably not the most commercial application. Not a lot of people are trying to retrieve the letters of Gertrude Bell.
But the thing is, everybody has something strange they're trying to do. And strange not in the sense of odd in the human experience, but rather strange in the sense of not a lot of other people are doing. And this is the amazing thing about the internet, which is the ability to have a medium that caters not just to our mass taste, not just to the tastes we all have in common, but to the very particular thing you needed to do that afternoon. And I was doubtless doing something that afternoon that was very particular to the work I needed to be doing, that was completely different than what you needed to be doing, and the medium worked for both of us. And the change there in terms of access to what all that has been done and said in human history is really, literally unparalleled. You know, when you look at something like the readership of the New York Times or the Guardian, say, you see that the web readership is 10 or 20 times higher than the readership of the paper, which meant that there was this incredible untapped demand, or rather, there was an incredible unsatisfied demand for people to know what was going on. We didn't even know that it was there because those newspapers couldn't reach those people. The Guardian, Alan Risberger at The Guardian, found some of the old log ledgers, some of the old financial ledgers from The Guardian when it was a Manchester newspaper. They would send 650 copies overseas. Out of the entire print run, 650 copies went to any expatriate anywhere. The Guardian's audience is now principally outside the UK, which is to say they are a more international paper than they are a UK paper.
So the problem of the business model, though, for all these places, will the iPad save them? What will save them?
Yeah, you know, I don't think anything will save newspapers in the sense of preserving the old model. The new business model is going to be some combination of advertising revenue and cost cutting, frankly. I mean, the thing is that newspapers got large, very much bloated around things that weren't hard news, right? You can always add more sports reporting and so forth. All of that stuff is being stripped off by the niche sites, right? A niche sports reporting site is going to go deeper on your team than any newspaper can.
Now, when you look at the web and you look at what's going on around the world, what I'm struck by is there's a great deal of ferment or turmoil. You have Google in China. You have BlackBerry and the United Arab Emirates, but then it turns out BlackBerry in India. And in each of these cases, it is the technology and the technology companies' attempt to be entirely open and a government's desire for some degree of control. Who's going to win this battle?
I think I believe that well, in the short haul, plainly the technology companies are going to have to give more. The governments of the world are plainly going to have some degree of ability to look into the communication stream of their citizens and visitors. No government would sign up not to do that as these tools become general purpose. I think that in the long haul, the governments are going to have to give more, for the simple reason that you past a certain point, you can't cripple your cell phone network without exiting a modern economy, right? You can't be a modern state if people don't have a camera phone in their pocket that works. And so what you saw with the Iranian regime after the June 2009 elections was they would periodically just shut down the cell phone network because they couldn't think of any other way to contain the ability of the dissidents to coordinate with one another.
But people look at China and they say, well, China has been very effective at monitoring.
China has been very effective at monitoring.
And it's used the technology to actually monitor its people.
China has been very effective at using the technology to monitor the web. They've been less effective at using the technology to monitor cell phones, right? When the Sichuan quake broke out, everybody found out about it on QQ, which is China's largest internet service. In '79, when they had an earthquake of similar size, it took them 3 months to admit that there had been an earthquake. So the cell phone has stripped the Chinese government of the ability to prevent events from being announced in real time.
And of course, the expectation should be that once the Chinese use all these technologies more and more, they will start having ADD and fragmented memories and stop reading and working so hard.
Yeah.
So we'll be fine economically as well.
Exactly. We'll find that we can flood them with spurious emails and tweets, and then they can we'll re-level the economic playing field.
Clay, sure, pleasure to have you.
Great. Thanks very much, Reed. Thanks very much for having me.
And we will be right back.
What's interesting to me is how naturally and organically in the United States we quickly begin to reset our economy, and we see this only happening in its infancy. We're again on this new period of reinventing a new American dream and a new way of life.
My name is Rich, and this is my Sitco.